Where are we on the hammer being dropped?
Yeah, the All-Star weekend is done, right? That was the big celebration for Steve Ballmer at the Intuit Dome. Kawhi Leonard being very impressive in the All-Star game. And so now I think the rest of the league is waiting to see what Adam Silver and the commissioner's office is going to do here, because they're very lucky right now that the Clippers are stumbling, right? You can imagine a scenario in which they don't trade James Harden, that they don't trade Ivica Zubac, and they're actually one of the, sleeper teams in the Western Conference. Right now they're in the play-in picture, but you can imagine an alternate universe in which this is kind of hanging over the league as Kawhi Leonard and James Harden are rolling down the stretch run and trying to knock off one of these teams in the postseason. And it's one of the reasons why this investigation, as thorough as Adam Silver claims it to be, it also presents a really interesting problem. What if the Clippers just run the table and win the championship this year? Like, what happens then? Because as much as we want due diligence, I think the rest of the league is like, hey, if a team wants to circumvent the cap as egregiously as is being alleged here, according to Pablo Torre's reporting, and Pablo Torre finds out, you are actually incentivized to do this if it means that you can give yourself a championship in short order. Because if it does take a whole entire year to investigate this, then I think it would behoove teams to say, hey, if they take 2 years to investigate this, we got a 2-year window to win this whole thing. And so I think for Lawrence Frank and the organization, Steve Ballmer, they did not move their chips to the middle to go all in this year. In fact, they went the opposite. And so I think that might be telling. It would certainly explain why the Clippers, out of nowhere, were sellers at the deadline when no one in the league seemed to think they were going to be moving off of James Harden until a week before it actually happened. And the fact that they moved off of Ivica Zubac, a really good young center that can help you win a championship, the fact that they moved him for longer term assets, I think would explain a lot if the NBA is going to drop the hammer on the Los Angeles Clippers. Kawhi Leonard, I think, is tied to the organization because of both the contract and because of the aspiration investigation scandal. But certainly the NBA has to figure out there is a balance here. Yes, you want due diligence, but you also can't take 2 years to investigate a cap circumvention scandal, because at that point, they might be raising the banner.
So when we hear the NBA might drop the hammer, everyone's like, oh no, not the hammer. To me, that means a forced sale. But in your opinion, or from what you've heard, what constitutes the NBA dropping the hammer on the Clippers?
A forced sale would be quite the dramatic move by Adam Silver. I don't suspect that is going to happen, because Steve Ballmer is the richest owner in sports, and he's one of the richest owners in America. He just hosted the All-Star game and one of Adam Silver's allies in the league office. I would be very surprised if they force the sale. Now, remember, they didn't force the sale of Robert Sarver with the Phoenix Suns. The league investigation, uncovered a lot of workplace violations and harassment issues with regards to Robert Sarver. But ultimately, that was not a case where they said, you have to sell the team. He sold the team at his own volition. And so maybe it's a case where Adam Silver levies some sort of punishments, whether it's forcing Kawhi Leonard's contract to be invalidated. And I think that would be one of the things that is on the table, because that's what David Stern did with the Joe Smith cap circumvention scandal with the Minnesota Timberwolves decades ago. But the interesting thing on that is it provides a conundrum where I think if Kawhi Leonard is now a free agent, you're going to see a frenzy for his services with the likes of the Lakers, with the likes of the Golden State Warriors, or the New York Knicks. They would try to go get Kawhi Leonard at this stage as a free agent. That actually, I think, would create more hysteria and chaos around the league than actually forcing the Clippers' hand. So I think losing picks, I think invalidating Kawhi Leonard's contract is on the table, and also banning Steve Ballmer from the arena, I think, would be the most hurtful in terms of punishing Steve Ballmer. in the realistic options for Adam Silver, I think barring him from being at the games, he's the most animated owner in sports there on the sideline, courtside for the Los Angeles Clippers. So if you're essentially saying you can't enter your own arena and sit courtside, I think that would be a huge hit to Steve Ballmer's ego. And ultimately, I don't think that they could find him enough that he would be dissuaded from doing something similar. Remember, Steve Ballmer was already investigated for cap circumvention under DeAndre Jordan's contract, and they were found that they actually were guilty in that instance, and they were fined by the league. So the idea that Steve Ballmer would suddenly say, I don't want to do this cap circumvention stuff anymore, it falls flat in the eye of the fact that they did this already and were able to sign Kawhi Leonard to this contract and do these backdoor deals with his uncle, while also understanding, hey, we already got investigated and fined for cap circumvention. Let's kind of blur the lines here and let's invest into this company that has Kawhi Leonard as a title sponsor in a no-show contract.
I just keep thinking about, according to the Google machine, Ballmer's net worth is approximately $125.4 billion. How much do you have to find somebody worth $125 billion to make their Monday worse? I don't know the answer, but I know the owners are out here living different, Tom. One of those owners, by the way, is out here in these streets quote tweeting you. Suns owner Mat Ishbia quote tweeted your article on tanking. So come on, walk me through that. Like looking at the phone, seeing Ishbia retweet you. How's that?
Yeah, I was surprised to see that because I actually, in that article, I said tanking is a real stain on the NBA and it needs to be fixed. But if we're already here acknowledging that tanking is happening, like Adam Silver said, he's witnessing tanking like never before. So I took that and said, yeah, let's power rank the tanking teams at this point. Who has the most incentive to tank? Who has the roster to tank? Who has the most basically reason to break it all down and go for ping pong balls at this point? And so I was advocating in that article that tanking is a real problem in the league. And he took the liberty at that point to quote tweet this. I think the word tanking might have been triggering for him. Mat Ishbia, of course, not a believer in the draft, has sold all his picks going forward. There was an article on ESPN.com a couple years ago that just basically said that they're punting on the draft. They don't believe that it's a real mechanism for them to build for the future. So I'm not surprised that Mat Ishbia, who's been against the NBA draft for years, is out here saying that tanking is loser behavior because they clearly do not value the NBA draft like other NBA teams are. But I also think Fitz, when he quote tweeted me, I wondered if he was actually thinking I was Mark Cuban. I don't look like Mark Cuban. I don't have a head of hair like Mark Cuban, but he was just the other day advocating for teams to embrace tanking. The NBA should embrace tanking because fans should want to go to the arena and it's cheaper if they're not trying to win. What they care about is that it's a good entertainment product and families want to get there not to see necessarily their team win, but to have a fun atmosphere. I totally disagree with Mark Cuban on that front, but I do think that Mat Ishbia coming out here and lighting a fire on my mentions and making a lot more people click on that Yahoo Sports story, I would say thank you, Mat Ishbia, and would also say we're in alignment. I think tanking is a real stain on the league, and I think they should get rid of the NBA draft. I think the entire thing about hey, we need to deliver these draft picks to rebuilding teams, I think that creates a real moral hazard for these teams. Basically saying we want to lose on purpose in order to get the single greatest team building mechanism in the four major sports. And that's getting the number one overall pick in the NBA draft. You're 5 times more likely to get an MVP with the number one overall pick as opposed to the other picks in the top 5. And you're twice as likely to get an all-star if you're picking number one overall compared to the other spots in the top 5. So I can understand why all these teams are like, hey, Matt, that's great. You don't care about the draft like we do. But if you look at the best teams in the NBA, whether it's Anthony Edwards, whether it's Victor Wembanyama, you're going to see that it tends to be the teams that have a number one overall pick are at the top of the league. You look at historically with Shaq, Tim Duncan, LeBron James. These are where you find the franchise cornerstones. And so that's why teams are tanking. When you get cost-controlled superstars for 8 years without their say, that is why you're seeing a lot of tanking. I don't think any of these tweaks that the NBA is considering is going to do anything to stop them.
Oh, speaking of tanking, we did hear some proposed tweaks that the NBA was considering, or at least throwing around making. Flat odds for lottery teams. Teams can't pick in the top 4 year after making conference finals. It's a long, long list of potential things that have been discussed about to curb tanking. Will that have an impact on tanking?
I think it's more likely that these Band-Aids are implemented, but this is a Band-Aid on something that needs an amputation. Let's just be honest here. None of these things that we're talking about here are going to dissuade teams from trying to lose as many games as possible in order to give themselves a good chance at winning the number 1 overall pick. The fact of the matter is, you get a guy who's at the mid-level exception, like Victor Wembanyama. Victor Wembanyama is getting paid like a mid-level guy for the next 2 years. It's not just that you can get Victor Wembanyama. It's that he's cost-controlled at basically $10 million a year, when a guy at that talent level in the open market would get 50, 60, 70 million dollars a year. So it's not just that you can get your choice of the number 1 overall pick when there's Cam Boozer and AJ DeBonsa, Caleb Wilson, Darren Peterson. It's not just that. It's that you can get them under your roof for the next 7-8 years at a cost-controlled rookie scale contract. And so I think all of these little Band-Aids here that you can't pick in the top 5 or top 4 in multiple years. Look, this is an overreaction to the San Antonio Spurs getting Dylan Harper, Stephon Castle, and Victor Wembanyama. No one was calling for this when the Phoenix Suns were drafting top 5 in 3 years in a row with Dragon Bender, Joshua Jackson, and DeAndre Ayton. This is an overreaction. I don't think it's going to do anything. The real button that they need to push is to go into rookie free agency. But Adam Silver, I don't think you get the votes for that. So I think that's what you're seeing here is they're trying to find these half measures in order to get the owners to sign off on it. But really, if you want to fix the problem, which is tanking, which is incentivizing teams to lose games on purpose, I don't think these half measures are going to do much.
All right, so let's go from the worst to some of the best. One thing that I love is Tom's title. You got the TomTheFinder.com. That's where you get the title tiers. All right, so TomTheFinder.com, title tiers. Was told last week that you moved some things around and had other teams with OKC on the title tiers, which we referenced. But here's the thing. Then I watched OKC yesterday go in with like a third of their squad and absolutely whoop up on Cleveland. Is that a statement that maybe are we inching OKC back up on their own tier? Tom?
Fitz, you know this is a make or miss league. The Thunder, they all look like Steph Curry out there. They won that game in the fourth quarter down the stretch because they hit 21 of 41 3-pointers. Casey Wallace was awesome. Chet Holmgren definitely outplayed Evan Mobley, but at the end of the day, when you outscore the Cavs by 24 points in the 3-point column, you're going to win those games. It doesn't matter who you are on the other side. So yes, on one night, the second unit for the Oklahoma City Thunder look great. But I would say to you that the biggest question for me is, when is SGA going to be back? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has been out for weeks with an abdominal strain. And out of the All-Star break, the team announced that he's going to be out for at least 4 more games, at least a week, in which he will be reevaluated. And I think this is a significant underrated injury across the league. If they don't have 100% Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, this is an open race. And that's why I have 4 teams in the top tier, the 5-star tier, with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander being sidelined. OKC at home when they make 21 threes and just go Nova on them. That's to be expected if you're going to hit 21 threes. What's not to be expected is that is a sustainable model without Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in uniform. And I think when you look at Detroit and the way they're playing, and San Antonio, and I just covered a game in which the Denver Nuggets scored 157 points on the Portland Trailblazers. I think those 4 teams are on the same tier, and Boston is knocking on the door, and we'll see what the New York Knicks, if they can sustain anything. But if Shai Gilgeous-Alexander it needs to miss more time, A, I think the Thunder are very vulnerable at the top, and B, I think Cade Cunningham is going to run away with the MVP race. I think when you look at the numbers, yes, he doesn't hold a candle to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's numbers in the per game stats. But if you look at the fact that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander might not actually be eligible because of all the missed games, and Victor Wembanyama, Luka Doncic, and Nikola Jokic are all on pace to miss qualification for the MVP award because of that 65-game rule. So at the end of the day, I think what's really interesting is that maybe the Thunder just decide to punt the regular season awards and just say, we need to get Shai Gilgeous-Alexander healthy for the postseason run, because as we see in 7 champions in the last 7 years, the Thunder don't want to be the 8th one to lose that championship stranglehold at the top of the NBA.